Right. Hi, Ashay. Welcome to the show.
Hi. It's good
How,
morning where I am, or it's good afternoon. Thank you for
oh,
having
where
me.
where are you? I actually
Well,
didn't ask you that.
I'm right here in San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay.
So yes,
Yes,
yes. But I
that's
just hopped off a call with a client in Brazil. So I'm always like, where are we in
yeah.
the world?
Yes, I think it's really fun part of podcasting is that you do meet people from all over the world, and it's just really fun to get everybody's different
Mm-hmm.
perspectives and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes backgrounds. I love seeing people's backgrounds. Sometimes I'm like, oh, can I come to where you are?
Yes, yes,
Well, thank you for being here today. Could you share with our audience what you do and
yes.
what kind of brought you to do what you do?
That's such a great question. So I started out working in leadership. And that's such a broad term. And so that's leadership in terms of how do you lead your organization and leading from the lens of inclusive leadership. So when I talk about leadership, I'm always talking about inclusive leadership. So how you lead your organization, how you do your team building, how you manage conflict, how do you scale up your business or your organization. So that's where I started and just had some really outstanding clients just around the world, which really just I love to see how individuals do it differently across different cultures and across different countries. In the midst of that, what I started dialing in on was the importance of wellness and well-being and leadership. And I was sensing that that's often overlooked because that is the foundation of how we truly lead. And I'm
Mhm,
not saying that right now, because right now, wellness and well being has become a little bit of a buzzword
mhm,
after the pandemic. However, this is work I was doing before. But I can say that is all the more true today. And so
mhm,
I've been dialing in and supporting women and leading well and to stop trying to balance the world on their back and shoulders and to
mhm.
cultivate that inner world of well-beingness that really helps them really lead and live as boldly, believe it or not, and as audaciously as they want to.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. So, how has what you did before the pandemic, did the pandemic change what you do and how you do it? So, you said you were focusing on this prior to the pandemic, but did the pandemic further impact how you train leaders?
Yes, it did, undeniably so. The the need for wellness has increased. Like it's always been present.
Mhm,
And the need to really focus and drill in on our wellness and own it
mhm,
unapologetically is greater now. We've come through this interesting times, and the truth is that we really don't know how we've been impacted.
mhm,
We all live different lives, we have different perspectives and different cultures, but every single individual has not come through this unscathed. And so I often ask individuals, tell me, like, have you taken the time to even just do an assessment, an evaluation,
mhm.
or just like, hello, self, how are we
Right.
leading today that's
Yeah.
different than
Mhm,
before? And we are we shouldered it, right?
mhm,
We shouldered it, we did what we needed to do. And what I'm seeing and hearing from some of my leaders is it's so many things. Like there was a lot of hope that individuals had, believe it or not. Like in the pandemic, there was this pinnacle of hope of that change was happening, whatever that
mhm.
was.
Yeah.
Whether it was around the climate, around animals,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
that whole pinnacle of hope has for many, like I was really hopeful and now I'm not. And
mm,
so that's greater. Depression is greater. A sense of anxiety is greater.
mhm.
And the sense to be performative and pretend like it doesn't happen is also greater.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, one of the reasons I started this podcast was so I'm a nurse. I don't know if you know that, but I'm a nurse. And so I, of course, worked through the pandemic and um, healthcare is a huge area where wellness is so ignored. I mean, and if any employee in the world needs wellness, it's healthcare workers because they're in very high stress environments. They work very long hours. They do work that is literally life and death at times. And it's dangerous. If you're not taking care of yourself, it actually is dangerous to the patient. But it is also an area where wellness is completely ignored. It is getting better in the sense of like it's being talked about more, it's being encouraged more, but there's not real actual changes in um on the ground changes, like at work changes. They're encouraging us to do it, but it's all got to be on your own time and outside of work and all those kinds of things. But at least it's being talked about. The conversation is open. But what I remember during the pandemic, there was a lot of anxiety for everyone. And I thought, okay, when the pandemic passes, this will get better. But it has not. It has not gotten better. In fact, in many ways, I feel like it's actually gotten worse. And I too have always
Mhm.
been, prior to this whole wellness, explosion, very
Mhm.
much, I'm also a yoga teacher and I, a
Mhm.
meditator and breathwork facilitator and all those things. And so
Mhm.
I have always been on this, my own personal journey of
Mhm.
wellness and self-realization and self-actualization, all that stuff. And I thought, oh gosh, wow, like this is really needed because it has served me so well during this very difficult time. It really served me. And so I wound up thinking, wow, everyone needs this. And so the podcast was born. But what I feel like happened was that people went from a status quo. They didn't like
Mhm.
what was going on, especially
Mhm.
women. They were overburdened, they were
Mhm.
overworked both at work and at home. They were
Mhm.
feeling burnt out, they were all the things, but
Mhm.
it was status quo. It was kind of the way that it was done and there was really no model for anything different.
Yep.
And then the pandemic hit and everything just, the great resignation and
Yes.
working from home and like everything
Yes.
kind of just the whole structure kind of fell
Mhm.
apart,
Mhm.
which was scary, but also this like, oh, this can
Mhm.
be done differently. There's
Mhm.
another way, maybe a better way.
Mhm.
And that's
Mhm.
very exciting, but also very
Mhm.
scary because it's the unknown. So what are your thoughts on all of that? And did you see all of that in your work?
You hit up on so many things, so
Yeah.
many things. So which is great, which is great. So let me even back up. Yes, for healthcare workers, even in the midst. So I work with a group of physicians and charge nurses as well. And one of the things that I ended up doing was we just talked about, and it's an assessment we did, and there was a group of physicians and that entire group, which is really true, I think, for many, high empathy and all about servant leadership, right?
Hmm.
High
Hmm.
empathy, servant leadership, which meant that even when they knew boundaries needed to be in place, because they're team players, because they don't want
Hmm.
to burden their other colleagues or peers because they know how much
Hmm.
work they have as
Hmm.
well, they would just take it.
Yeah.
And so the morale, the burnout was just exacerbated.
Hmm.
And you're right, it's actually worse now because of that. And it is and so working with these group of physicians, really just having to have them be really clear about their boundaries and
Hmm.
also not to. So there's this thing about guilt. Well, I don't want to burden and I don't want to do
Hmm.
this. And, I don't want to be perceived as uncooperative or not a team player or any of these things.
Hmm.
And one of the physicians that actually got really, really severely ill, just because of just overextension, was
Hmm.
like, my goodness, if I can do it differently, if I can do it differently. Because
Yeah.
even though I've done all of that and I did all of that, honestly, they just stepped over me and kept going.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so in that moment,
Mhm.
yeah, they recognize, oh, great, Dr. So and so showed up, right? But down the road, it still
Mhm.
wasn't enough, right? It's this well that you can never, like in our minds, we think we just keep doing this, just a little
Yeah.
bit. It's not. And
Yeah.
so, in that reflection of working with her, like, I really just wish I had just really, because the investment in myself would allow me to even be better. And we know that in theory, but it feels
Mhm.
so counterintuitive. That
Yeah.
meaning, like really stopping and becoming still actually allows us to go further.
Yeah.
Everything in the world tells us differently, but that is the absolute truth. And so, in that, she's like, I wish I was just still a little bit longer. I wish I had said no more, right?
Mhm.
Because no one
Mhm.
really goes back and say, remember when Dr. So and so did? No, they have
Yeah.
continued on their journey.
Yes. Yes.
They've gone forward, and
Yes.
they literally stepped over me and just kept going. And so
Mhm.
it is what I really want to. What I'm supporting my leaders is leading from the place of foresight and insight, and not hindsight as much. Hindsight is
Mhm.
beautiful; it gives us lessons and insight to a certain
Mhm.
extent. But if we can do that in the beginning, it's
Yeah.
so critical. The other thing is because there's this story. Well, the pandemic is over. and everything is good.
Right.
That's not true. It's not true. And here's the other part where I'm seeing, the pandemic in theory is over, but the impact, right? The weight that we
Yeah.
carried, the depth, like we went deeper in places in our strength that we didn't even know we had. And
Mhm.
honestly, we're fatigued. We're
Mhm.
tired. We may not want to admit it because some of us feel guilty, like, why am I fatigued? Why am I tired? So you wrestle
Right.
with that. The other
Yeah.
thing that I see with my leaders is that there's this thing about, is my crisis really serious enough? Everyone else's
Mhm.
is more serious. Maybe my crisis is not as serious as so and so or so and so, but we really need to even wait and take care of ourselves before we get to the state of a crisis. But even if we're in one, we know comparative syndrome is not just for successes. It's
Yeah.
also, do I really have it as bad as everyone else? And
Yeah.
you are the most important thing.
Right.
You are absolutely the most critical foundation component in your world and in your
Mhm.
life. And we know that in theory, but I have to keep coming back to that. You are the soul of everything that you do, from loving on your children, from showing up in your
Mhm.
partnership, from being servants in your community, from leading your organization. If you are not well, it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
I know we're good at showing up and looking great. Like one of my, like she looks
Yeah.
fantastic, but
Right. Yeah.
she's like, but I'm so depressed. I'm so anxious. I have so much
Yeah.
angst around that. And
Yeah.
so really, if we can begin as a collective of women to really hold ourselves accountable in a sense of, I don't need you to be well. I don't need you to be
Yeah.
100%. And guess what? I'm not going to hold it against you. It has
Mhm.
nothing to do with your capabilities or your competencies,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And to be able
So
to do
true.
that, because that really is what resilience is. Our
Mhm.
story, that resilience is a single narrative. We love a single hero, but
Mhm.
that's not it. Collectively, our resilience really grows and expands and deepens so that you can show up for me when Ashe is not able to.
Mhm.
We step
Yeah.
in for one another, we step back, we step in for one another, we step back.
Mhm.
So that honestly, we're not even trying to balance, it's a counterbalance. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna go this way and then I'm gonna go this way as I need to. And that's really what's important.
Yeah. And before, we got on the call, or before I started recording, we were talking a little bit, and you made a point to say that when you talk about leaders, you're not just talking about leaders in an organization. You're talking about leaders of a family, leaders in a community, all different types of leaders.
Thank you. Yes. I, there is no distinction.
Yeah.
Right? Whether you're leading yourself first and foremost. Can I just tell you, sometimes it's just hard to lead ourselves.
Yes.
I think oftentimes
Very.
we don't. I'm gonna go over here and focus on leading this person over here because really just leading myself, it's just kind of complicated, a little
Yeah.
messy. So I'm just not gonna
Yeah.
deal with it right now. So
Yeah.
whether we're talking about leading ourselves, leading our family, a lot of us are the go-to in our family. We are
Mhm.
the absolute go-to. And we are leading through that on top
Yeah.
of leading in a community or leading in an organization. So it's all across the board.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure when we're not leading.
It's so true. It is so true. Absolutely. I definitely believe that. And if we can lead from a place of compassion, which is another thing that I think that we have so much empathy and compassion for others, but we seem to not be able to turn that around on ourselves so well. And I see it with a lot of the people that I work with in work. Sometimes you're in really challenging circumstances that there is no good answer, there is no good outcome. It's just hard. Plain and simple, it is just hard. And so having that awareness and then having compassion for yourself that it is really hard and it's okay to have feelings around that and to give yourself some love and compassion around that is not only okay, but it's needed and necessary so then you can step forward and continue to lead.
Thank you. It is. It's
Yeah.
such a great point. Um, I think that, not I think, I know, as caregivers, moms are just like we think of moms of nurturing, but you're caregiving, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
sometimes you're caregiving for the children and your parents and whomever. And we have a tendency to ignore our own fatigue or to judge ourselves when
Yeah.
we are feeling tired. Like maybe I shouldn't feel this tired,
Yeah.
which I should just be able to push through this.
Mhm.
Who said that?
Yeah.
How did that become an ideal or a belief system? And so one of the activities I do like to do for my leaders, like when is the last, first of all, what does it mean to be kind to yourself? What what does that mean? We're generous to others and we're so kind to others, right? We're talking about that compassion, but what does that look like to be kind to yourself? And really sit and dig into that. And really, that should be an everyday question. Like for the next 30 days, like ask yourself, what does it mean to be kind to myself? And I don't mean going to go get a pedicure or manicure or anything else like that. I want you to like it's digging deeper. It means, you know what, having boundaries and holding not others accountable, holding myself accountable to those boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And being able to verbalize those boundaries. Sometimes even once we write them down, but we don't share them. Boundaries are only as impactful as you are holding yourself accountable, but more importantly, that you're sharing, like, these are my boundaries and I'm going to hold myself to it. Now, what you do, that's your business.
Right.
But let me tell you what I'm not going to do. Right.
Yeah.
That's being kind to yourself.
Yes.
Even regardless of what someone's response or reaction is. Because we get in this place where we feel like when I say that I'm working with women not to balance the world on their back and shoulders, there's this compelling element like I have to hold space for you if you're uncomfortable, or I need to hold space for you if you feel like, this is not working out and I've done. No, you don't. No, you don't. So going back and really asking yourself, what does it really mean to be kind to myself? To me, what is it that I need in this moment? And it might just be like, I'm going to carve out this whatever amount of time. You don't have to be okay with it, but I'm going to do it because I need to be okay with it.
Right.
And I have to be the center in order to really pour out into others. And practicing it it's not necessarily, it's simple, but it's not the easiest when the world is pulling on you, right? So we hear all these things, but I'm more about practice it though. It's the practicing that's important.
Yeah, it really is. And we talk a lot about practices on this show, and it's those 1% shifts, those one tiny little step in the right direction that you take on a very regular basis, ideally every day, but tiny, people think I need to go from here to here and it needs to happen immediately. And if I didn't, then I failed and I should just throw in the towel and give up because it's just not possible for me. But when you break things down and you ask people to do them in teeny tiny little chunks, it's amazing how far you can get over a period of time. And no one says this is not a race, right? This is not a race. It's not a competition. It's not a best of, right? It's your life. And it's something that you will ideally give yourself permission to do for the rest of your life, like forever until you draw your last breath. So take it easy, take it slow. It just, I always talk about getting curious, like just get curious about yourself and what you feel drawn to, and then go in the direction of that thing. And then just keep doing that over and over and over again.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It is those small, impactful steps and acts that we take. And I also just want to say it's also going to be messy.
Yeah.
As one that works with a lot of leaders on so many, when we do change management and we talk about making change and transformation, if it's not messy, I'm not sure you're changing. Right. So don't expect it to be all neat and clean and everything else like that. What I find is that the change happens in the midst of what looks messy. Yeah. So if you're in the midst and something's looking messy, say, come on in, messiness. Yeah. Because this is where I know some transformation is going to happen. So those small acts that you're talking about, and the fact that it's going to get messy.
Yeah. And perfect. Uncomfortable. Embrace the uncomfortable.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yes. I'm like, because when I would talk about inclusive, I'm like, if you're not comfortable and if you're not uncomfortable and it's not messy, then we need to go deeper.
Right. Yeah.
We need to get to the not the roots, but as my grandmother would say, to the roots. We got to get to the roots of everything, and you got to keep digging in and digging in.
Yes. I love that. And so this is my kind of assessment, and you tell me what you think, because you've been working with leaders for a long time, but I feel like, we lived in this male dominated society for a really long time. And so these work systems are kind of created for men. They were created by and for men. And they have a very masculine feel to them, which is a very doing feel. So that's my yoga teaching coming in. But the men are that masculine energy is the doing energy. And the feminine energy is more of the receiving energy. And so you have these masculine systems that were put in place by men, and it's do. And I can't tell you how many times I get to the end of the day and my kids are coming home from school and I think, gosh, I feel like I did not get anything done today. Like I worked all day and yet I feel like I didn't get anything done. And then there's all kinds of self-judgment on that. So we have these, doing work systems that women have now inserted themselves into, right? Because that was the only option, right? We came from a place where we were not allowed to work. Then we fought our way into, having careers and working alongside men, but in these very masculine systems. And the masculine systems are not working for us. And so we need to change the whole system. So if you're working with these female leaders, are you seeing that they're trying to squeeze themselves into the old paradigm, or are they trying to create a new paradigm for themselves and for their employees?
That's a great question. So many of my leaders are actually working on shattering or dismantling the paradigm, but it's tiresome and it's hard. And so, so we're recognizing it, at least many of my leaders are, they're recognizing it, that this is what happened. I've adopted this system of belief that really is not my belief system. So now that I'm recognizing this, I'm evaluating certain things. So now I'm getting ready to, roll up my sleeve and take this energy, and now I'm going to dismantle it. Well, it goes back to what you were saying earlier. I have to remind them that every act you do, every step you take, it's impactful and important. So sometimes, actually, I'm lying. Oftentimes, my leaders, they get a little impatient because they want it yesterday. And of course, because you can see how unhealthy it is. So who doesn't want that healing to start happening? And then you start pushing harder and harder, and then it becomes a fatigue, and then you become tired, and you become burned out, and then more. So the question is also, you can't change something at the level that it was created. So we're using the same type of philosophy to change something. And this again comes back with the collectiveness of really what it means as women for us to be collective. Men have this independent, single story, heroic narrative, right? I do it by myself, pull myself up, right? And that's our story. We can be more impactful collectively. We're not going to be able to change that system at the level it was created. And I have to remind, so you're trying to change something with the exact same thing that it was created by. You can't do that. The transformation and the revolution happens when we actually even approach it differently. And it feels, again, counterintuitive because we bought into a system of falsehood and illusion. And that means sometimes I actually need to rest so I can go forward. And it feels like, why am I resting? I remember when I was launching something, I was doing this and I'm working with these leaders. I'm like, you need to really just take some days off. And it's like, have you lost your mind? You don't understand, et cetera. I'm like, look, my terms and conditions that we're going to work together.
Yeah.
And so they took off a day, took off 2 days. But over time, when they took off those 5 days, they came back. Oh my gosh. Right? Because their mind was a little bit clearer. They can see things differently. It took less time to do what they wanted. And that's what I want individuals to understand. When we can actually take a step back and pause, and this, if you're doing yoga and all of that, the stillness, as much as we love to be in motion, and I don't know, let me just speak for myself. As a recovering perfectionist and type A person who had my checklist, I love checking off stuff. I love moving and shaking. So for me to be still and to understand that the movement and forward motion happens more so in my stillness. And I can get a lot more done. So you asked me, there is the recognition that yes, these paradigms and systems have happened. The question is, are you using the same type of paradigm and system to dismantle it? Because if you are, you're burning yourself out already. So the question is to go back and ask yourself, not buying into the ideologies of something that was created for someone else, but to really begin. And that's why I say you got to really investigate and explore what works, what really works. And we know, like, in one way we know, anecdotally, right? We can watch a movie and say, yes, collection of women, that's how we kick butt, that's how we do it. And it goes back to what you said, but we have to practice that. And we have to be consistent with that. So that again, collectively, we can dismantle that. And so I'm constantly reminding my leaders, you're actually using that same tool that created this system to try and break it down. And that's why it's not working.
So then how do you guide, if a woman is not like running her own business or the head of a company, like who has complete control, creatively or about how she works, how are you helping women to do that within the system? Because they're still in the system. So how are you, like, what tools do you give them?
You know, my one of my strongest recommendation is, so we have tools. However, community is so important. Community is so important. Tools are as good as you are if you can use them and apply them.
Mhm.
The first thing I really do is encourage individuals to create a community, or with my group, we have a community, because when you're in that structure and system, it can feel like you are pushing up against something by yourself.
Mhm.
And you go in excited and you're inspired, and then everything just doesn't happen the way you want. So now you're pissed,
Right.
upset, you're frustrated, you're discouraged. But you need that
Yeah.
community to come back to share your
Mhm.
insight, to share your thoughts, to be reminded that, things take time, to be reminded that even every little act you do is really not little. We use that phrase, and I use that lightly. Um, there's an organization where a group of women, and they're not even what you would consider middle management, but they were considered at one like lead. So they're not really in the management position, but they're getting there. Their collective, consistent efforts began to really influence and impact um, across, and I'm going to use the word in quotes up as well. But they were there to hold the space. So when you're frustrated, so individuals who are, especially those who are doing any type of work, whether it's inclusive work or working in medical, right?
Mhm.
You need someone to where you can dip your well in so you can keep going forward.
Yeah.
So that when you are sometimes that single voice by yourself, sometimes we
Mhm.
often are, you
Mhm.
are not when there's some type of gaslighting going down or
Mhm.
some microaggression going down, you need
Yeah.
someone, you need to know that even while this is happening, guess what? I have this collective
Yeah.
of women, of sisters that back me up.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna go off on you today. You better be
Right.
ready. Because I'm like, as soon as I'm done here, I'm gonna call someone in my community
Yeah.
to be able to do that. That really is the greatest tool, because we can talk about and DEI work and inclusive leadership. We talk about having difficult conversations. We talk about conflict management. We talk about having aligning conversations. We talk about all these things, which are great.
Mhm.
But I always, but the community, because here's what happens: we often suffer in silence,
Yeah.
and and sometimes as caregivers, we don't mind helping others, but we won't really say, and I need support too.
Yeah.
It's not a sign of your weakness, it really is a sign of your strength. And we say that like with this power and vulnerability. Like we have these great phrases, and then I'm asked, how are you practicing that?
Right.
And so for one of my leaders, I'm like, I just need you every day to find a way to ask for support. That's all I
Mhm.
need you to do. It
Yeah.
feels very simple, but it's a very powerful action to do every day. I want you
Yeah.
to find support. I want you to request support around something every single day.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable. She's mad. She's anxious. Like, there's all of those things.
Yes.
But that's that discomfort. But that's when we start breaking the story and the
Yeah.
narrative that no longer serves us.
Yes. So much of what I personally have learned in life, and I think is just universally true, is so much of our circumstance comes down to, and our ability to affect change and to do the things we want and have the life we want comes down to the narrative that we tell ourselves.
Indeed. Woo,
Yeah. Yeah.
indeed.
It really does. And when I first learned that, I'm the first person, I'm very woo woo. My whole audience knows how woo woo I am. But each new thing that I've learned, I have rejected it originally. I have said, no, no way, that's not true. And then I have been able to open up just a little bit of curiosity and then to find that it's true. So I say that only because if I hear, I can hear people listening to this saying, what? No, that's crazy. It's not about mindset. It's about this person or this system
Mm-mm,
or this,
mm,
whatever outside of me. That's the
mhm,
problem.
mhm,
But, and it is a problem. No one's saying it's not a
mhm,
problem. But in my personal experience of what I've seen of the world, and I want to hear,
mhm,
your experience. The key, that's the lock. I'm the
mhm,
key,
mhm.
and I'm the key to changing that circumstance by what I'm thinking in my mind. Yeah.
1,000%, 1,000%, which is why I focus on. So when women are balancing the world and on their back and shoulders, I'm like, no, we're going to focus on the inner world.
Yeah.
That's where the key is. And that's what you're talking about, that mindset. Because the story that you tell yourself informs what action you're going to take, whether it's, first of all, even a reaction or a response in general. The stories we tell ourselves are the most powerful stories. And so the great thing, and what I'm really humbled to do, is work with women who are really going up against huge systems that have been hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And that's where I say, you go out, I'm going to break down this system, I'm going to do all of these things. The ones that are most successful, because they're sustainable, is because they really focus on what is the inner story, the inner narrative that I'm telling myself in this moment, because it really is going to impact how I either react or respond to this. And based on that will also impact what those next steps look like.
Yes.
And so that's why, and I'm going to go here, I'm going to say this. I tell individuals, your greatest protest, like when we talk about protests for change and marketing, I'm all for that. And how are you marching for yourself?
Yeah.
Because that's the true march. What's that story you tell? It's so, you go out and you like, we want change, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But what change are you creating for yourself first?
Yeah.
And that goes for every organization I go into. It's so funny. One of the leaders I go in, their whole group of them, like, Shay, if you're gonna make us cry today, just let us know, because we need tissue. Literally, one of my trainings, one of the leaders walked out and they were gone like the first half. So I finally went, where did they go? And so I found them in the bathroom. And I remember she said, this is not what this is supposed to be about. I shouldn't be crying. Like, what, I shouldn't have to deal with this. We're supposed to be doing both A, B, and C.
Right.
And she says, and I said, so how are you going to change that if you're not even looking at how are you going to help yourself even lead and change among them? She goes, I know you're right. I just didn't want to have to deal with this today. Like, so to your point, it is, what is the story or narrative you're telling yourself today? That is so powerful because it includes your belief systems, right? Right?
Yes.
It lets you know if you're aligning to your values or not.
Yeah.
It also brings up what are your true fears that maybe you might be ignoring or not. And so you're going harder so you don't have to deal with that. So if you can deal with your own single narrative, I promise you. So that's with a woman that there's a country where actually domestic workers were treated as owned by families. And this person went and campaigned against that. And their lives literally were in danger because they're just, families are used to own. Like if you have a child, even though you're a domestic worker, your child now I kind of own. It was, and I remember working with them. I was like, oh my goodness. It took her several years to get a law on the books to change that. She wasn't the first one to try and do that. But she was the first one to be able to do and recognize that every single act I do impacts change. Sometimes I see the change right away. Sometimes I don't, but I know it impacts change. Every single narrative I tell myself in this moment is going to impact how I respond to all of these. And trust me, she was getting a lot of things thrown at her.
Yeah.
And so now she's like, that thing mindset. I kind of like it, Ashay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
You're like, oh, actually, that works.
That's the greatest tool.
It's what you're saying. I mean, it impacts so many things, but one thing, which is kind of what you're pointing to there, is burnout. Because somebody who's telling themselves a different narrative would probably have burnt out and said, I can't do this. Too much is coming at me. It's too dangerous. It's too sad. It's too whatever. It's never going to change. I'm not making any change. I give up, So if you really want change, the story that you're telling yourself could lead to the difference between keeping on the path and giving up on the path.
And giving up.
Yeah.
Which in the end, as individuals, as we are, who really like to have impact, it also means giving up on the impact you would have that would resonate across so many lives.
Yeah, that's amazing. And to go back just a little bit to what you were talking about with having support, I love that you said that. Community is another huge piece that we focus on in the show. And I feel like that's like one of the superpowers of women is that we are community-oriented people. We are meant to be in community. We collaborate beautifully. We communicate well. We are good at supporting one another. This is like one of our absolute superpowers that is not necessarily, I feel like in our culture, it's not talked about and it's also not celebrated, but it is absolutely true.
It is, if you're going to pull any tool in your toolkit, pull that one out, because
Yeah.
that is, it's not celebrated, it's not talked about. Maybe it's not, people don't think it's sexy enough, but I'm using it because, we're all about, it's not that wonderful, beautiful, shiny new tool, because it's not. It's
Yeah.
age old and deep in
Yes.
wisdom, honey.
Right. If it ain't broke, don't
Right?
fix it. Right. I
Right.
mean, why?
Right.
Yes.
It is the foundation of what so many things have been built on. It's actually even how women have been able to sustain themselves against, right?
Yes.
Against so many forces and systems.
Yes.
And so we don't do it enough consistently. And
Mhm.
that's where and that's really my biggest call right now, is to make sure we do that, because then we get to impact also the stories that are told in the media, the
Yeah.
stories that are told through society, the story, we need to be the owners of that. We don't need to do it like we need to go chase it, but naturally and organically it comes out. And ask yourself, why isn't it the story being told in society and the media? Because they know it's powerful.
They do. They do.
It's
And but
powerful.
our life, again, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of postulating here, but male dominated society. But I think in years gone by, community was something that happened kind of naturally and organically, and it
It
was
did.
just a part of people's everyday lives, was this built-in community. And we just don't function like that anymore. I mean, in most places, we are in our own little homes or apartments or whatever it is. We maybe not know our neighbor. We go to our jobs, which do not foster community, except for, I will say, in the nursing world, great community there. Nurses really, I mean, on a good floor, there's, always culture everywhere, but where
Yes,
I
yes.
work, great community among the nurses. It's just it's not set up. It's not set up to foster community. So we have to kind of go in search of it, which is also often stepping outside of your comfort zone and being vulnerable and taking the time and all those things. But I think you like hit the nail on the head. It's so important for us, for our souls, for just the health of our bodies and souls, but also for helping to make the impact in the world that we want to make.
I so agree. I love it when you said for our souls. One of my mentors said, and this is like 30 years ago, and he talked about false power, right? And he talked about this element of false power is when you define someone else's reality, right? You
Mhm.
define someone else's reality and success. That individual buys into your definition of what their reality and success should be, and then they work towards that.
Mhm.
Right? So you're
Mhm.
no longer
Mhm.
working towards your own defined reality and
Right.
success. You're working
Yeah.
towards someone else's reality and success. And when you
Yeah.
achieve it, you're misled to think, oh, I'm successful, but somewhere inside there's a misalignment. It's the
Yeah.
same thing about community. So the single narrative story that we bought into around success is that we bought into this illusion of what success is. And now the opportunity is to go back and for us to really think about, how are we really defining that? And then we own that. And then that's how we decide success. My grandmother and great grandmother are even like my aunt, who's still, she's like, I don't understand. Like, what do you mean you're going to schedule time to get together with your friends and community? And you're going to have I don't get that. Like, that's just what we did.
Mhm.
You know how you talk about the organic? I'm like, I know, but there's just been a shift. We've
Yeah.
been a little bit misdirected and redirected. So she's always shaking her head like, I just don't
Yeah.
understand. I don't get this. And all these, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna schedule, we're gonna do this. It's like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah. You do you, I guess. I don't
right,
know.
exactly. But it's how in her community, which if I were to look at it, by definition, none of the individuals should have gone to college, just in terms of like what the economic cost was. But there was never a doubt that not one of the children in that community everyone knew. They didn't know
Yeah.
how, but they just knew collectively they were going to do that. There was
Yeah.
never a doubt about that. And she always
Yeah.
tells me that we never questioned, we just knew what's going to happen. We just knew it
Yeah.
was going to happen.
Yeah.
And we held that vision.
Yeah. And then it happened, right?
And then
Because
it happened.
that's how the universe
Right.
works.
Right. But here's
Yeah.
the thing. Not only did my mother go to college, but because of that, she's
Yeah.
like, because of that vision, generations are now being impacted. Your
Right.
mom and you and
Yeah.
my niece, like that one vision is a multitude of impact.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. And we can all think of all the areas of life that we are most passionate about. We seek to see change in that way.
Yes.
And how generation after generation. I am very excited for the next generation. I have a young daughter, she's 15. And I think, oh my gosh, like it's going to be such a different world for her than it was for me or for my mom. And, keep going on and on. I mean, it's just very exciting. And I know that they'll continue to even, make more change.
Yes.
How do you work with entrepreneurs or do you only work with people who are like within an organization?
No, it's funny because I started working specifically with entrepreneurs.
Okay.
My I started working with entrepreneurs and then the circle grew and started working with. So you know how you like, can you come in and do a
Right.
keynote? And I
Right.
did
Yeah.
that. And like, well, can you do a contract with us and help? So I kind of got into this whole realm of working with organizations on a larger scale at some point. And so now dialing it back, I'm also working with, and I say organization, but let me be clear, some of my organizations now are 2 people, 3 people,
Yeah. That's it.
right?
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. And so they're not always large anymore.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like going back to my roots as
Yeah.
well. My roots
Yeah.
as well. So no, I work with entrepreneurs and I work, and I say that because even you're a business of one, whatever, you're still a
Yeah.
business, right?
Right. Yeah,
Still a
absolutely.
business. So
Absolutely.
hello.
And sometimes the business of one or two is really hard. Like you said, if you
Oh,
don't have that community. I mean, in starting this podcast, I've been fortunate enough. I took some classes and different things where I met women, and it has been just a lifesaver because like you said, going back to that well, like there were moments where like, I am giving up. I am done. Like this is
mhm,
too hard.
mhm.
But I was able to, phone a friend as what was that old game show?
Yes.
I was able to phone a friend and be like, I'm so frustrated about whatever. And I feel like I just want to give up. And then that person was able to either give me a little piece of information that helped me get through, or just support me and help me get through, or just commiserate with me and say, oh my God, me too. I'm up against that wall too. And I can't seem to figure it out. And then we have a conversation, and somehow something comes out of that conversation that helps us both move forward. Like it's been invaluable, completely invaluable in this process. So yes, those small entrepreneurial businesses, I think they could really benefit from what you do. So that's wonderful.
Yeah. I also just want to say that you're not supposed to figure things out on your own. I know we think we're supposed to be independent. I was working with Dr. Melly Turbalon. I had her come and do some work with an organization, and I love the work she does. She actually is the one that coined the term cultural humility. And by practice, she's a MD,
Okay.
but we've used cultural humility across different industries. And she talks about one key thing, which I love. She says, we brought into the society where we have to be the experts. And if you're an entrepreneur or you're doing online work, we know that one of the things that we do, even with our online business, is talk about how we're an expert. That's how we do our lead magnets and everything else. So there's so many things, models of business built around being
Yes.
the expert.
Yes.
And she talked about, even as an MD, and when she was training other physicians on this concept before it actually burst and everyone's talking about cultural humility, and I mean burst like out in a really powerful way, is that we forget that we need to be comfortable learning, and that should always be our first thing.
Yeah.
So when you're frustrated, I love that you reached out to someone, because we have this ideal sometimes, this false ideal that we should be able to figure out things independently. We should be this expert. And sure, we might be an expert in many areas, but it doesn't have to be across the board. And by goodness, when you find something you need to get some learning and support and celebrate that. Oh my gosh, I get to actually learn from someone. It's tiresome to be the expert in leading all the time. Take a back seat, get a notebook and pen, and take and learn. It's like such a great place. And that's one of the things she was talking to our leaders is like, get out of your expert mode. If you can't figure something out, pick up the phone and call someone, which is why we need that community. So you don't feel bad that you don't know about it. And again, I'm gonna say this, it's not a reflection of whether you're competent or not, because the patriarch will tell you that must mean you must be incompetent or you don't know enough. You're not supposed to know everything. I don't know.
Right.
Just not.
Yes, yes. And I mean, if you've ever worked with someone or even like, gone to your own physician, whatever the case may be, I would so much rather someone say to me, you know what? I don't know. So I'm going to get back to you on that. I'm going to investigate it and I'm going to get back to you on that rather than give you some bull, you know what answer that you know is
Yes.
not true.
Yes.
And it just reeks of inauthenticity. I would so much,
Yes.
I would respect that. I would absolutely respect that. But I don't know that that's talked about as much. I've not heard this term cultural humility. So you said it exploded, but I actually have never heard that term.
Oh,
So
okay.
what does
Okay.
that actually mean?
So cultural humility. So when Dr. Turvalon came out with this, and it's 4 principles, the core principle is that you're always a lifelong learner. And so we use there's a term culture competence that was out. And so we were talking about like culture, like and you're in healthcare. So you talk about culture centered care, right? I'm gonna go
Mhm,
there, or
mhm,
right. Culture humility really focuses on the fact that you are a lifelong learner and you're never going to know everything. So you
mhm.
don't even try to, but you lean into the fact that you're always open to be able to take in knowledge from others. And that's how you show up, right? So if you can
Yeah,
show up with the posture, that goes back to the curiosity. Tell me more,
yeah,
right? Tell me
yeah,
more about that, right? I love when my doctor's like, I'm caring for my father. And so I love most of his physicians are really great. They're like, okay, actually, I didn't know that. I'm going to follow
yeah.
up. I have more trust for that person that says,
Yes.
I'm going to follow up. I don't know. Thank you
Yeah.
for bringing that to my awareness
Yes.
than someone who feels like they need to posture. So
Right.
cultural humility builds on that pack. It also talks about dynamic powers and making sure that you're aware of when you're in a relationship and there's a power dynamic and that you're
Mhm.
cognizant of that, that you don't
Yeah.
use that in a way which we see, right? That we
Mhm.
see in so many ways that you don't use that in a way to um, oppress anyone or to put down anyone. So I
Okay.
would just say Dr. Melanie Turbalon, just Google her cultural humility. She
Okay.
has like education and banking across the world. She's done a lot of powerful things. And I love that this concept came out of doing something medically for her physicians and it's used across the board. So thank you for
Yeah.
actually even just underscoring, hey, I actually don't know about that. So I can pause
Yeah.
and talk more about it.
Yeah. I love that concept. And I'm going to bring that into work and see if anything's being done with that in my organization. I mean, because obviously I work in a hospital, so and if she's
Mm-hmm.
a physician and this is really
Mm-hmm.
blown up, I would think there would be things being done, but maybe it's being done on different levels that I'm being exposed to and I'm just not familiar with it. But I will definitely bring that in. So that was a great learning point for me. This is one of the reasons I love doing these podcasts. I learn stuff all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. See,
Yeah.
constantly learning. That's
Constantly
her.
learning the growth mindset. We talk about growth
Yeah.
mindset a
Oh,
lot. Yeah.
yes. Love
Which
it.
is,
Love it.
I'm very passionate about. But so is there anything else? We're getting close to the end of our time. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience before we end?
One thing I want to just emphasize, and you said it, and it sounds like you're saying it throughout your podcast. I listened to some as well. They're just really great nuggets of wisdom. And one is check your single narrative story or check the narrative that you're
Mhm.
telling yourself. What's the
Mhm.
story that you're telling yourself in this moment?
Yeah.
And really investigate that, sit with that, and allow that story to talk to you. Never underestimate truly, like this is, like we hear about it, we hear it in movies, but really never underestimate the power of an act. It's not
Mhm.
a big or small act, it's just an act. Because built within that act is immeasurable impact, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Immeasurable change, immeasurable transformation.
Yeah.
And sometimes what is perceived as the smallest act is the most powerful act.
Mhm.
And then really, I'm going to go back to what I said, leadership, leading a family, leading your community, leading your organization, leading all of the above.
Yeah.
If you do not put yourself first, like really, really see what it means to be kind to yourself. Like that's the question to ask yourself, even
Yeah.
daily. What do I need to do today to be kind to myself? If
Yeah.
you can do that daily, that's huge.
Yeah.
You start really dialing in on what you need and what works for you, not what anyone else says. And so those are just some things to take forward. We're so busy leading others. We always talk about the healers of the community need to be healed. And
Mhm.
it's so true.
Yeah.
Give yourself the space, give yourself the time, the generosity to dial into yourself. If we were just take a 10, I don't know, 100 that what we pour into others and pour into ourselves, it would be so much different.
It would.
We are so worth it.
Yeah.
We are so worth it.
Yeah, we are. We are so worth it. We can just accept that
Yes.
fact that we are so worth it. I have to ask, because of all this mindset stuff, do you, when you're working with your leaders, do you have them meditate?
Oh, yes.
Oh, you
So
do?
it's funny, yeah. When you ask me about working with entrepreneurs, they would send me their bid. They're like, okay, here's my business plan. I'm like, okay, what is your, and I'm gonna go here. What's your spiritual plan? I look at that first.
Yeah.
And they're like,
Okay.
spiritual plan. I'm like, yes. And so
Yeah.
yes, I do.
That's fantastic. Because a lot of this, stuff where you're saying like, what's the story you're telling yourself? Like so many people, I think they don't even know the story they're telling themselves, right? They haven't taken the time to even pay attention to the story that they're telling themselves. And that story is impacting every single thing in their life. And they don't even know what the story is. And meditation is a beautiful tool to witness the story that you're telling yourself over and over all day long. It's like somebody whispering in your ear all day long. You better make sure what they're whispering is beneficial to you, or it's
Yes.
going to cause problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That person that went in the bathroom, that was a surgeon. And I don't know if anyone's ever worked or told. Let me tell you, this surgeon was the one, I know we're closing, but I have to share this.
Yeah.
Came in, do this training. There's a group of, I think it was maybe 15 or 20 surgeons. And as I'm opening, I'm saying, is there any questions you have? And this person, the one who actually ended up going to the bathroom, it was like, what can you possibly teach us? That was the question, right? How your face is. I was like, what could you possibly teach us that we don't already know?
Oh, that was
Right?
bold. Yeah.
Wasn't it? It was bold and brazen.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I had to check, make sure my single narrative was like, oh, I'm getting ready. Just watch and see.
Yeah.
But that person is the one that went into the bathroom, was like, this is not what this is supposed to be. And that individual is the one's like all about mindset and realizes how important that is. So I just want to bring it back. It can sound like woo-woo. It can sound like very ethereal, Pollyannish, but this surgeon who's very concrete, very detailed, really understands now more so. And so now I keynote at some of their events, but guess what? Guess who meditates when some of their meetings, they do their little 10-minute meditation of surgeons.
That's fantastic. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here, Ashay. This was so fun. So fun. I really enjoyed our time together. Of course.
Thank you for having me. I love the work you do. Please continue it on. It means such a huge difference. Thank you.
I will. And you want to tell the listeners where they can find you, and then I can put it in the show notes.
Yes. So the easiest place to go to ashaylytle.com, ACHELYTLE.com. And that way that has all my links, all my hyperlinks, on my social media and all of that. And that's where you can find me.
Okay. That's perfect. And I will, like I said, put that in the show notes.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Okay. You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.